So welcome to the Lovefly Podcast. Paul Tizzard, Fear Flying Coach. And today's guest is a friend, co-founder, I don't know what else I can call you, interesting man, windswept and interesting, John Bond. Welcome, John.
Thank you. I've heard you call me lots and lots of other things too.
Yeah, I'm just being polite because, it's like, it's a podcast. So welcome. So we thought it's been long overdue since we've told your story about how you're linked into Lovefly, and also you're off on an adventure soon as well. So where do you want to start, mate?
Well, I guess if we start at kind of chronologically, we'll get to the trip and everything towards the end, I think. So I'm not sure what people are going to be interested about specifically. I think some of the things
very little, very
about us, yeah. So we met. I was thinking about this the other day. We met in 1987. Can you believe?
Jeez.
And
which some of the listeners weren't even born then.
Exactly. Probably most of them. And we continued. That was in the military. We worked together in a department store in London, and then I went off on my travels, and you went off on your excursions with Virgin at the time. And then we would meet up and we would travel together, and it was absolutely fantastic. And sadly, that came to an end because of 9/11, because Virgin no longer flew to Toronto. By that time, I was living in Toronto, and but we obviously kept in touch. We're obviously firm friends and co-conspirators in some ways. And
well, we always kind of wanted to carry on working because we'd done so many jobs together. And I think back on it, you've skipped over a few. So we went from the military. You worked at Harrods, as you mentioned. I don't know if you were deliberately not trying to say who they were. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of name dropping. Just maybe you've forgotten it's that time. And then one of the weird things was that we seemed to, aside from sort of like being able to do trips together, before all that, we even did some film extra work together, didn't we? And I think you went off and did your own stuff as well. Yeah, that's it. And then when you then buggered off to Toronto, and I had a couple of other jobs before, but then doing the cabin crew thing, you were able to come away with me, which was brilliant. And then you also used some of the trips yourself because the concessions were amazing, and you're a person that's going to take advantage of that, which is always good. And we always kind of had this thing like, we'll end up working together in some way again at some point. We just didn't know how. And here we are back working with Lovefly. And so, which I think, and the reason that I wanted that was that because one of the things that when I first met you back in 87, as you reminded us in Germany, I was struck by your kind of, aside from your personal qualities, which there aren't that too many to list, to be honest, but you had this ability you just were sort of in command. I remember you were sort of holding court. We had to do some really crappy jobs, and you're very proactive, can do. There's just something, I just thought this guy sort of like really got himself sorted out. And I remember liking you straight away, and I thought, so it didn't surprise me that we're still mates now. Even though you've tried to move to countries, I managed to track you down. It's not been enough. But yeah, and I just thought there's something about the way that you operate, and having done those big cheese jobs like head of security in different places, I just think it would be really helpful to have someone like you who does the stuff that I'm rubbish at. And I think that's the great thing about the Lovefly group, is there's lots of people involved in it, but we all kind of do different things. There's a little bit of overlap, of course, but so I just thought you'd be perfect for this. So although it's kind of early days on the Lovefly journey, I still think that it'll be brilliant having your skills as well, aside from you being a mate. But that's it. Is that enough of that?
I think so, yeah. More than enough. I think for me, I think it was, I was thinking about this, because I think it was Gita who asked me, or talked about doing a podcast with us together and wanting to know my Lovefly story. And I was quite surprised because I wasn't sure I had a Lovefly story, right? I was kind of, have a story, do I? And I think for me, the doing all the different security jobs and running teams, and I worked in hotels and a children's hospital and an art gallery, and amongst a variety of other things, but they were the later ones in my career. When I no longer did that, very soon afterwards, I discovered that I was missing something. And it wasn't the salary, it wasn't, the title, it wasn't anything like that. I was suddenly aware that I missed being able to help people. And I must have noticed it when I was doing it, but it wasn't in the forefront. There was always too many things going on, and the helping people was kind of wrapped up in the latest disaster kind of thing that we were dealing with.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that people might misunderstand, and I think this is an interesting thingy, I don't know what the word is, paradox, perhaps that's the word, I don't know, is that the jobs that you've done, you wouldn't necessarily at first glance go think that's about helping people, the military, police, in the army, and then the various security jobs where you're head of security. You wouldn't necessarily think that's about helping. You'd think it's about enforcing. But I think very much you've always found that it is a way that you've got some power. Then you've always used it well.
Well, I think it was a little bit selfish as well on my part, because I always felt that I always did the job completely differently to anybody else. The way you're supposed to do it, I couldn't do it. It was impossible for me to do it. And the way I did it was through relationships with people. And one of my staff said to me one day, how come with all the things, all the meetings you've got, they're back to back, they're this, you always find time. If someone comes in and they have a question, you always find time for them.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if it's important to them, it has to be important to me. And that relationship I build by making the thing that's important to them important to me will help me down the road when I need help. When something's gone wrong and we need an elevator switched off quickly, the guy I helped will have the key and he'll just do it for me because it's the thing to do, right? So it really, I felt that it was the relationships were what built your ability to do a good job. And I always used to talk about the people who actually run an organization. And the people who actually run an organization do not have the big titles. They're the people sitting in offices who have been there for 20 or 30 years and who know the unofficial connections, and they're able to get something done in a quarter or a fraction of the time that the board or the CEO or the VPs can, because they all need committee meetings. And the people who are actually doing it can just do it. They can just make it happen. Yeah. So I always developed those relationships. And then the other side of that, the job that I was most proud of was working in the children's hospital. And that was where my kind of philosophy came from, where you think of people in a certain way to start off. So it doesn't matter how they've approached you. It doesn't matter what they've said or what they've posted maybe or whatever. You think of them as people who are in a difficult situation. They're desperately looking for help. And they may have misspoke. They may have said a naughty word. Oh dear. We've all said naughty words. So what? But if you take what they're trying to say, the importance of that, filter out all the stuff that's totally irrelevant, and then deal with that, then you start in a place where you're looking to help them and they feel like they're being helped. And that immediately de-escalates.
Yeah. Oh, was that it? Was it the end of the sentence?
That was it, yeah. It was so good, I just stopped there.
You just stopped, quick way ahead. Okay. So roll forward then. Lovefly, you felt like that there was a bit of a gap, that you weren't helping people so much. And so Geeta said you need to tell your Lovefly story. So you have to do that because, that's what Geeta wants. So you have to deliver.
Well, it was kind of like most of the things I've done, there's a song that Billy Connolly plays on his banjo called The Way the Gypsies Go. And when he introduces it, he says it's kind of like his life. And I've always felt it's kind of like my life. I've never really had much of a plan. I've looked at things that I've enjoyed and I've believed in, and that's the thing that's gravitated me. And so I'd seen you or talked to you about your work with Fearful Flyers, but I never really understood it. It was a part of a conversation we had that maybe.
Yeah, I understand it either. I was hoping you'd give me some clarity.
But it was like 15 minutes of a 5-hour chat together kind of thing. And then it was only when we were talking about this, when we were together before the pandemic, and we said maybe there's an opportunity to do something, and maybe there's an opportunity to do something in Canada, to do something in the UK, and to do something in the US. And we had kind of these large scope ideas without really knowing how we would actually get to do that. And we set up a company in Canada, and then, as if by magic, the pandemic hit. So that was kind of the end.
That was the end of that. Yeah.
And I remember us chatting on FaceTime and talking about it, and we kind of came to the conclusion that it might actually be a good thing, because it might narrow our scope and force us to focus on a few things. And one of the things we decided to focus on was a Facebook group. And we said maybe the way to do this is to build up a base of people, and then the ideas will come from those people. And with your experience, we'll be able to make it actually into something, be able to mold the two things together. And I think that's what we did. And as I kind of became more and more involved with the Facebook page, I suddenly felt like, and not particularly me was helping people, but it was that I was part of something that was very obviously helping people. And even if we had no idea why on some occasions, there was people who said, when you said this, that's when it connected me. Or when you mentioned that, that's when I knew that I'd be able to do it. And it was fascinating for me on one level, because I love the part of my job in security was getting people to do what I needed them to do when they didn't want to do it. And that's all about figuring out how you speak and the words you use and the manipulation of language to get them to calm down and realize, okay, I'm going to do what this guy says. And it was that side that fascinated me, that it was different words that would just connect, that would just go straight through and bang. And it's almost to me like they talk about alcoholics and drug addicts who have a moment of clarity. And a moment of clarity is a thing. And it isn't any one thing. It isn't, I can't use my moment of clarity with you, because it probably won't work. It could be, waking up on the floor in the morning with 4 cans of dog food around you and a spoon in your hand, right? And thinking, that's it. That's enough for me. I need to do something. And I think the people who are frightened of flying are very similar in the sense that they have a eureka moment, and there's no one going to know what that moment is going to be. They're not going to know what it's going to be. I think what the Facebook group is it provides this, and I've talked about this before, it provides this buffet approach, right? Together with the podcasts, where we get everybody in who has a voice, who has something to say, who has a skill or experience or knowledge that might help someone. And then we just lay it all on the table, and everyone comes in and picks what they want. And the thing that works for them, it works for them. That's fantastic. We don't question it. We don't worry about it. We say that was fantastic, and let's move forward. And that's I think what I kind of got from the company and the group, was the fact that I felt I was part of something that was really and truly helping people.
Yeah. It definitely does do that. I mean, you've turned into an active contributor on there now. I've noticed that. And you've also, you poor sod, you've been through all the podcasts. Now, you've known me for years, and that must be torture. You don't have to listen to me. You try to move countries, and now you listen to a podcast.
I was how it came about to a certain extent was, again, it was the Facebook group teaching me what I needed to do. So people would ask questions, or which podcast is whatever, and which podcast is flying at night, and which podcast is whatever. And yes, you can go into the podcast and scroll down and all that sort of thing. But what I started to do, I've almost finished it, is write a little blurb.
Yes.
And so that I could kind of figure out what it was really simply, and just go into my own list. I wouldn't have to go into a podcast site or anything like that.
Yeah.
Just go in and bang, and away we went. So that was the instigator of doing it. And then, because I was trying to get somewhat fit for this trip I'm doing, I was doing a lot of walking. And so I was doing a lot of walking. I would put my headphones on and off I go. And if I was lucky, I could get 2 or 3 podcasts in one session. Probably two and a half in one session, depending on the podcasts. And they all, it was interesting because I didn't obviously remember everything everybody said, but every single one of them had a line or a quote or a phrase that would stick out. And it was those things that I thought, that may be the thing, that may be the hook that pulls someone in and gives them a little bit of a foundation beneath their feet to be able to move forward. So yeah, and it's amazing that there's such a variety of approaches. And the other thing is that I really enjoy is nobody puts any other person down, or system or book or therapy. Very often people are saying, well, we do this and we don't really know why it works, but it does, right? And there's a humble part to it where the people on the podcast are very much out to help people as well. And I think that comes through. And again, just like the Facebook group, that's the same thing. It's people going, wow, this guy has got all these people from all these different companies who are all providing different services, but he gives them a platform for to get their information out. Why would he do that? Well, the simple answer is because he wants to help people, and that's the whole goal.
Who is this person?
I don't know. I've never met him.
Now, you've known me too long to come out start dishing out compliments like that. I'm gonna be cringing inside. I'll edit all that out. Just go back to the bits and then edit in where you call me a knobhead. I mean, genuinely I wanted it to be, certainly when I first started it, I thought it's got to make some money at some point, but it felt more like an experiment. So, certainly after 20 odd years of running the other courses, and it wasn't that it was all about profit, because it wasn't, because that's not enough to sustain anything, and it didn't make tons and tons of money. It made more money it does now, but that's all right. But this has been a really interesting experiment, just to sort of see, like, could it be grown organically? So before the Virgin contract last November, I was thinking, what could we do if we just do some good stuff? And also I felt like there's so much stuff that's out there that's free anyway, and it's all just available. Why not just have it all sort of come in through, not trying to sort of like control the world, but just a place where you can get reliable stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the goal, really, because I just thought, the reality is you can Google everything. There's nothing that you can't find out if you want to, but just to try and make it so that it was like a bit lighthearted, not too serious and stuff, because there's a lot of stuff out there which is a bit heavy. And I've always thought people who are scared of flying, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just, they might have other stuff as well, but when it comes to fear of flying, it's just, you get into some bad habits, you repeat them, and they become entrenched, and that to a greater or lesser degree. And I just thought, if there was something I wanted to change, a habit, then I'd go about it in a very pragmatic way, and I'd just chip away at it, and then want to start looking into the research. That's exactly the right thing to do. That's the thing that sustains change. It's not like a 7 or a 28-day diet is okay. It's a good start, it's a good catalyst. But actually, you need to just keep doing something and keep just going, And that's why I was thinking of all those courses that I ran, the one-day sort of one-stop shop was really powerful catalyst for people. And don't get me wrong, we'll probably do something like that again, but you've got to have other stuff as well. And people might find things, and I've done no problems recommending somebody else, because quite often people in the past would say, yeah, we wanted to come on your course, but the date was wrong or the airport was wrong you're running at. And so that we went on this other one. It's just so made me realize that actually it's about the right place at the right time. And provided you do a good job, they'll come. And if it doesn't work for them, they'll go somewhere else. And that's just the way it goes, isn't it?
And I think the difference between, you're absolutely right. We can Google.
Am I?
Yeah, you are. First time ever.
Permission to take the rest of the day off.
You can Google anything you want, but I think the thing that makes the connection is the trust of the person who's giving the information. And people are trusting you on the podcast, so they're trusting the people on the podcast. And they're also trusting the fact that they can make contact with those people without feeling like they're being pressured into anything, because many of the people say, well, you can just ask them, maybe it won't work for you. And if I don't think it'll work for you, I'll tell you it won't work for you, And I think that's the approach in a world where everyone's trying to sell you something. They always used to say in sales, well, you sell yourself. And I think that's very true. But you can either sell yourself genuinely, almost by accident, which is what I think we do, or you can sell yourself with a definite goal to getting something by putting on a persona. And obviously, we're not intelligent or good enough actors to put on a persona.
That's very true. Yes.
So again, I think it's the connection thing that makes the difference. Right? It really does bring people together and allow people the place where they can try things or they can talk about things. They can, and again, going back to it, and talk about things, sometimes using the wrong words and sometimes misspeaking and sometimes not realizing what they're saying for how someone else might perceive it. But if we take it that everyone's genuinely either needs help or is trying to give help, then we can move off from there, and there's no need for anyone to be concerned about it.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Something I thought about as you were saying that was that quite a lot of the people who will say, the Nervous Flyers or previous Nervous Flyers will say, I love the pilot podcast or the crew or the technical things. And for me, they're not my favorite podcasts. My favorite ones are the stories, because I'm really interested, and I've learned so much from doing the podcast, more than I learned in 20 odd years of running courses with thousands of people on, every year. Although I kind of spotted the patterns, which are enough to do that audio, but actually talking to people and kind of going, well, what did you do and how did you get over it? I've learned so much that way. I don't know about you, but it's just, people's stories are just brilliant, aren't they?
Well, it is fascinating how people can have the same or very similar fear. But when you look at the people themselves, they're vastly different on probably almost everything you could ask them a question about. And their likes, their dislikes, the type of clothes they like, type of music they like, movies they like, they're vastly different, but they're joined together by this one thing. But how they get to this fear is also totally different. And for me, that's what is absolutely fascinating, because we tend to pigeonhole people. This person is good at that. If an actor's good, then he must be a good cook. Or, it's all these weird things that we associate together that mean nothing whatsoever. But when you actually listen to people honestly talking about things, it is fascinating how we can be so alike, but get there in completely different routes and for completely different reasons. And that absolutely fascinates me.
Yeah, because I've been impressed actually, because you've soaked up all these podcasts and doing the little notes and things. I think that's going to be really handy when we put that on the Facebook group or wherever we put it. But I suppose I'm interested because I guess you've never had a fear of flying. I'm guessing. I don't know. Actually, I've never asked you.
I've never had a fear of flying, but I did mention on the Facebook page. I went to Iceland right after the pandemic. I think it was last year, maybe the year before. I think it was 2021. I think I'd have to look. And I did the Ring Road tour, 8 days, traveling around. Absolutely fantastic. It's like different planets, not even different countries. It's like different planets all in Ireland. And but I booked it. I had not a care in the world. I had nothing at all. And a couple of days before, and it was still when the rules were for Canadian Airlines, you had to wear a mask at all times on the flight.
Yeah,
and they were very, very strict. You couldn't say, I'm eating a sandwich, holding a sandwich in your hand with no mask for an hour and a half, right? You had to take a bite and put it on and all this. And I'd had no problem wearing the mask either. And but I started to have an amount of trepidation, like thoughts, just like, well, suppose I get on the plane and the mask's on, and when it gets hot sometimes, and I'm going to get hot, and it wasn't anything about danger. It was just how I would feel, right? And also because I think I hadn't flown for quite a while, and because it's hard to fly from the sofa to the kitchen to get a glass of water, which is what we were doing for a year and a half or whatever. And of course, when I got there, I got caught up in all the, checking in and getting your snacks and doing all that. And the flight was fantastic. Coming back, I never even thought about it. Never even crossed my mind, and that was fine. But the thing that did connect me wasn't necessarily the fear of flying, but it was that during the pandemic, I'd had some chest pains and stuff. Right. And they finally diagnosed that I had high blood pressure. And there's nothing wrong with my heart. There's nothing wrong with anything. It's just I have high blood pressure and I hadn't done anything about it. And they gave me some medication. And the medication had some kind of adverse effect. I think the blood pressure itself had an adverse effect, first of all, and then the medication had an adverse effect. And I found myself having panic attacks for the first time in my life. And I'd never understood what a panic attack was. I just didn't understand at all. Once I had it, it was like having stowaway inside your own head, right? Because I can remember lying in bed, absolutely terrified, like literally absolutely terrified. And at the same time, saying to myself in my head, what are you terrified about? You're lying in bed. Like, this is ridiculous. But the other side of me was absolutely terrified, right? Yeah. And this went on for maybe a couple of weeks until I managed to sort the medication out and got it all sorted out. And it's totally fine now. And I would sleep with the iPad playing music from it was Pink Floyd music from a concert, very, very low. And it was just low enough that I could hear it, but I almost had to listen to hear it. And somehow that managed to keep me less panicked, shall we say. And so having gone through that.
How does that work then? How did you even work out that might help?
There was two things that helped. There was two things that helped. One was to walk. And I listened. That was probably the start during the pandemic of when I started to walk seriously. And I found once I got outside, with no podcast or nothing, just walking, once I got outside, the physical act of walking, I was in charge of. Yeah. I was in charge of walking. So the thing in my head, I could kind of somehow say to myself, well, you're not in charge because I'm walking and you want me to be panicked. Well, I'm not panicked walking. And so I kind of set myself up against each other somehow. And the music was just an idea that we all have those moments in the quiet moments in our lives where our thoughts take over. And I thought, well, if that's true, let's not have a quiet moment. And I just put it on and it played the whole night. But in the morning I got on and I got up and it was still playing. Right? And once I fell asleep, there was no nightmares, there was no night terrors, there was nothing like that. It was just the medication did something to my brain chemistry, you know. And there was even things where there was thoughts like, well, I can't live like this. which isn't a suicidal thought, but it's a thought, I can't live like this, right?
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why I have the greatest respect for people, and think people who are going through fears and phobias and panic and anxiety are the strongest people in the world. Right? Because you can't be strong if something isn't bothering you. If something's not bothering you, there's no reason to be strong. There's no reason to be brave. There's no reason to have courage. But when you're absolutely terrified, but you're still trying and you're still putting one foot in front of each other, regardless of whether a couple of times you take a few steps back or something goes wrong or whatever, you're still stronger than almost anyone else if it's in a plane sitting around you. Because if they're sitting there just enjoying their snack and watching the movie and not bothered in the slightest, there's no reason for them to be brave or strong, right? So that's why I have the greatest respect. And I actually feel kind of a little bit bad that it took something to happen to me to make me have any real understanding of it.
Yeah.
And I know that's common, but it's still, you wish you were better than that kind of thing. And it's just interesting when something happens and it's like a light bulb flash going off and you go, oh my God, this is what it means, right? So,
well, I think that makes sense. I mean, I've never had fear of flying in that sense. I've had a few moments where I've thought, what was that? But no, I can correct it. And when I had a couple of things that I got slightly obsessed about landing in the wet. I was thinking, why is that not a problem? I just got obsessed with it, and so I just asked one of the pilots and said, why is it not a problem? He said, well, we break the surface of the rain so we can make contact straight away because we don't want to be sliding anywhere. And obviously you've got to think of the weight of us when we land. That's a lot of weight plonking down.
That's just me and you.
And I said, yeah, exactly. And I said, yeah, but why didn't it just like skid off? And he said, well, you imagine you're going at 150 or whatever landing speed, and you in a big thing with everything pointing the same way. Why would it skid off? We're not going to do it. I was like, oh yeah, I suppose that makes sense. So that was just a little thing of mine. I thought, oh, okay. So once I got that, then I stopped thinking about it. So sometimes it just helps. But I've never had the fear of flying really properly. So I've often felt like a bit of a fake, because my thing has been, I've been a coach for as long as I can remember, and just about helping people to overcome stuff. And that was what I applied to it. And I was thinking, well, if this was a person coming to me and they were struggling to do something, anything else, how would I deal with them? How would I help them? I'd say, let's break it down. Where are you trying to get to? What have you done already? What's working? What's not working? Let's put some baby steps in place and just hold each other to account. And that seems to work for behavioral change. So I thought, why wouldn't it work for fear of flying? So rather than putting it up on a pedestal going, yes, but that's different, I figured that whether you are born with a fear of flying or not, it seems to be a bit of a moot point for some people, but I don't think you are, because you might not like it but you learn fear from the surroundings. And if the surroundings are safe, so whoever's with you at the time when you first fly makes it feel like safe, then you wouldn't think it was anything else, and so, and if you did have a trigger, then as long as someone can help you with that at the time, it's unlikely to take hold. But even if it did take hold, it's still learned.
Yeah.
So I figured, well, if something's learned, so if I learn anything, why couldn't I learn something else? Yeah. So I've kept a very, very simple approach to it, which always made me feel like a bit of a fake, which is why I get lots of guests on who do know what they're talking about and get away with it. Ask them a question, shut up.
But I think in many situations, the simplest answer is very often the correct answer. I know when I used to work in security, we went through all sorts of different incidents and events and whatever. And a lot of them, you didn't have any time to think. You had to make a decision and move on. And if it was right, it was right. If it was the right decision in the moment, but it proved to be the wrong decision 3 hours later, well, that was tough. We're working on a moment-to-moment basis. But when we did have a few minutes to actually think about something, one of the things I would always do is whoever we were with, regardless of what level they were, I would say, tell me what we're missing. And it didn't matter where you were in the organizational structure. I would point. You could own the building, you could be the CEO, you could be the janitor, you could be a nurse, you could be a doctor. It didn't matter to me. You've got a different perspective. And right now, I need as much perspectives as I can, because I'm making decisions on the fly here. And there's no way in the world I can know everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's very similar to what we're doing with the, with the podcasts and everything, is we're saying, here's a whole load of stuff from a whole load of different perspectives, right? And if the one's connected with you, then great. That's what we want.
Yeah. So on the subject of podcasts, as you've listened to them all, what would you say some of the sort of the key bits of learning that it's created for you, or the bits that have stood out, or anything really? And make that answer about 10 minutes so I don't have to speak for a while.
I do like, I've mentioned before on the Facebook page different ones I liked. I loved Geeta's because it was just a delight. It was someone who obviously loves life, is very joyful as a person, fantastically skilled. I mean, I don't know what instrument she played, but to travel around the world doing concerts, you have to be pretty good at doing that. And then to have something potentially come into your life and stop you, or potentially stop you from having that joy, or having as much of a delight, or maybe impact your career.
There aren't, I mean, it was a challenge for her because there aren't that many world-class level, kazoo players. So it completely stuffed her career,
It's difficult. It's difficult. So it was that the whole delight and joy of it for me got that one. I liked Captain Ron because it's a cliche, but he was down to earth, right? He was just an ordinary guy who happened to fly a plane. Like, and the way he spoke about it, he didn't make it dramatic. It wasn't anything like that. I loved Pete Higgins' one because he has the same sense of humor as me. And I'm not someone who laughs out loud. And when I listened to that podcast on my walk, I think people thought I was having some kind of medical issue, because every few steps I'd just be guffawing out loud, and I just thought that was fantastic.
I'll have to cut out some of it because it just
wasn't. Yes, I'm sure.
He is, yeah. He's got some stories. That guy, you spend some time with him, you'll see.
Yeah. And I kind of put them in two different categories. I put them into the category of professional experience and knowledge, which would be the pilots, the crew, air traffic control, some of the association people who were on, and the people who deal with therapies and all that kind of thing. I put them into one category. And then the other category is the people who've worked on their fear and are all at different stages, right? And maybe no one's cured, and maybe there's no such thing as being cured, but they're all feeling far more positive and moving forward to get to where they want to get to, but not forgetting the people that are still behind, and willing to do the podcast sometimes 2 or 3 times, willing to spend the time to invest it in people going through what they did go through. And I think those 2 sections pretty much cover everyone who comes into the podcast, because whichever side you want. Some people will say, well, I don't want to listen to a pilot because he can fly the plane. Of course, he's not scared, right? I want to listen to the person who's scared, right? And I want to know what they did, because I'm the person who's scared. If I want to know how to fly a plane, I'll ask a pilot, but I don't, right? And other people like Michael Talone, was it? He's very much, I need to know how things work. I want to understand how it works. And that gives me the confidence to be able to fight my fear. So those two segments of people on the podcast, I think, kind of cover all our bases.
Yeah, I agree. I think people have been so generous with their time, and I'm still chasing down a few others, because some people come forward and say, yes, I'd love to do it. And then, they don't appear for whatever reason. So but I like a good mix of sort of those 2 camps. That's exactly how I see it, actually, and there's still a few more technical people I want to get in. So I always can't, each time I think, well, I've had, I've covered most of the things that people ask about from a pilot's perspective, as far as I know. some things, you know, you could always go a bit more deeply on things, but I think generally broadly speaking, the main bits are covered.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff. But I love people's stories. But I want more stories. That's what I like.
Yeah. I think maybe another avenue that we could do with podcast is to have have a few people who have a fear of flying on together, but have a pilot or a crew member. So just one person, and they get to ask whatever they want, just like Michael and Steve did, right? I thought that was really good, because every time Steve gave an answer, Michael was like, "Oh yeah, well, hang on a minute," right? And he'd go back at him, and it was just, and Steve was just like, "Yeah, well, that's a great one, but it's this. Oh, what about that? Well, that's this." And the way it was just dealt with, it was a completely natural interaction, and I think that would be good for people as well. And I also, in relation to people not coming on, what I'd like to see is people doing the before and afters. But I think it's very, very difficult for someone facing a fear to come on as the before when they're saying they're going to conquer it. But now the pressure is sitting there. Suppose I don't conquer it. Suppose it doesn't happen. Suppose I. And yeah. So
no, I think you're right. Again, I'm gonna get some of those on. I want some people who are not, you know, have done nothing. They're literally turning up and they're going, I don't know anything. I haven't listened to anything. I want some of them on, because I think they'll be really interesting to see their journey.
Well, we could entitle those podcasts the what ifs.
Yeah.
Because it'd be, what if this? What if that? What if whatever? And we've all done that. I did that. My first ever traffic accident in Germany I went to, and we were going to it, and I was the junior guy. And the entire journey, what if? And the guy was like, "We don't know. We haven't got there yet. Could you just relax, right?" Then they turned us round, because they said, "Oh, well, there's no military involvement in the traffic accident." Fantastic. We got about 2 miles back towards where we were going, and they turned us round and sent us back to the traffic accident because it was a military train. And I was like, "I've never done a traffic accident with a military train. I did vehicles. What do you mean it's a train?" Totally panic struck. And of course, you just went and you dealt with it, right? But you had to get there to get into it, to kind of calm yourself down. So
yeah, I'm just gutted. I was thinking about the Michael Talone thing, and I thought that was a good episode. But I had something recently, and I said after, I wish I'd recorded that, because I was doing an element, you know, we do the premium thing where you get a bit more intense. So it's a 30-day program, but you get some coaching throughout it with me or Steve or anyone. And we had this one section, but because they were private, I couldn't do it. But it was 2 hours of them literally bombarding Steve with question after question. It was brilliant. And there were some questions where I was like, "Oh, I want to see how he deals with that one." I was just, you know, and I think
that would be fantastic. I
wish I'd recorded it, but I should have asked. I didn't think at the time. I didn't know it was going to be so good, you know.
No, but I think in the future we can try and get people in just to do that, right? And say, this is what we want to do, and whatever, right? So.
Yeah, I think that one of my goals is there's somebody in the group that I've reached out to, just to say, "Look, I know you're struggling a lot. I want you to come on the podcast," you know. But I'm in an hour at the moment, because they're at that beginning stage.
Yeah.
But I think that's real, and it's normal. We're not promising that it's all going to be magic by the end of it, but just to get sort of a real person that people can relate to. And you know, and sometimes they might say things that you hadn't thought about yet. I was all right till he said that, but that's the point, you know. That's why you need to get it all out there, don't you? So that happens in the group as well.
I think maybe with the people who are at that early stage and not really sure about doing it, one of the ways we could maybe approach it with them is to say, "Come and do it, but we will not do anything with it until you do the second one," right? And then we won't put them back to back. We'll put yours out, and then we'll wait a few weeks, and then we'll put the next one out, right? And so they essentially get editorial control. If they say, "I never want this to be public," we'll say, "Fine, won't do it," right? So there are ways around it, just like the same as recording it and you know, putting the images on YouTube. Many people won't want to do that, but some people might, you know. So
Yeah, you're right. So, a couple of things. You've got a trip coming up. Tell us about that.
Wow.
And yeah. So, because hopefully we'll be able to track you when you're doing your trip. You'll be able to share some stuff on the Instagram at Lovefly Help, and also on the Facebook, the Lovefly Facebook group. And yeah, we want to hear about that. And then I've got another question for you after that, which you'll know what it is if you've been absorbing the podcast. You know what my last question is already. So tell us about your trip.
So 47 days, 8 flights, 2 suspension bridges, just for those people who don't like heights. 3 multi-day treks, one over 8 days, 136 kilometers, one over 4 to 5 days, 58 kilometers, and another one over 4 days, 74 kilometers. So I'm going on March the 7th. I fly out from Toronto via Brazil to Argentina. I have I think it's 4 or 5 days in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. I then fly down south into Argentinian Patagonia to a place called El Calafate. Couple of days there, go and see the Puerto Moreno Glacier, one of the few glaciers that's sustaining itself and not decreasing. Then up to a place called El Chalten, which is where Mount Fitzroy is. 5 or 6 days there. It's essentially a backpacking town. So you just literally go out every day and you backpack. So a lot of multi-day, or a lot of single-day trekking.
Yeah.
And then back to El Calafate. Again, this bit's all on a bus. Then across into Chile to a place called Puerto Natales. And then into the Torres del Paine National Park to do the O Trek, which is an 8-day trek. Only 80 people are allowed on it at any one time. You have to do it anti-clockwise. You have to book campsites all the way around, and you have to pay to get in. And if you haven't done any of those things, you don't get in.
Wow.
So,
and as you're about 8 foot tall, do you count as 2 people?
Possibly. In some places I do. And then back to Puerto Natales. And then through a somewhat precarious organizational skill, I've managed to somehow have 5 flights between Puerto Natales, Santiago, Lima, and Cusco, but I only need 3. So okay. two are in the process of being cancelled, hopefully, and one's in the process of being changed to the right day, because it all got a little bit confusing at one point. But essentially, I spend 1 day in Santiago in Chile, and then I fly to Lima in Peru, straight through to Cusco. And Cusco is the base to do a trek to Chococuru, which is ruins that's bigger than Machu Picchu, but they've only cleared 40% of it. The only way you can get there is to walk. So it's 2 days in, a day there, 2 days out. And very often you can be the only person there because there's no other way to get in. I'm spending all in all just over 3 weeks in Cusco with that trek, and then I'm doing the Salcantay trek, which is over the mountains. It's the sister trek to the Inca Trail, and you trek for 4 days over the pass there, and then you end up at Aguas Caliente, which is also called Machu Picchu Pueblo, and the next day I go to Machu Picchu and then come back down, jump on the train and back to Cusco. And then while I'm in Cusco, I'm doing a whole load of day treks to different ruins and different salt flats and plains and all these other things. And then I fly back. I go from Cusco to Lima, spend the night in Lima, and then from Lima to via Bogota back to Toronto.
Wow.
So, yes.
My head's spinning just hearing it. The fact that you just rattled that all off, unless you've got something behind the screen there, with it all.
The bit that the first bit I said was written down about the suspension bridges, but I've been so involved in it for so long. It's a bit like the podcast; it just sticks, right? Things stick, kind of thing. So, so it was purely a trip that was born initially back in 2018. and I was looking for things to distract me from things that were going on. And then I did the Iceland trip, and then this just continued on, and I just started to find places and was like, okay, I wouldn't mind trying that, and I wouldn't mind trying this. And to kind of connect it back to something someone posted just before we came on, it was about life being too short.
Yeah.
And about you never know what's going to happen. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know if I can walk 136 kilometers in 8 days. Right? I've never actually done it. Right? And I don't know if I can get the elevation you need to go over the Selkirk Pass. I don't know what the weather's going to be like. I honestly don't know. But it's one of those things where I'd really like to try. And whatever I do, I can go, yes, I did it. And whatever I don't do, I can say, well, I tried.
Yes.
Right? And so there's no real lose. It's a win-win. You know. So
that sounds amazing. I mean, we're looking forward to that. I mean, obviously, by the time this goes out, you've already left. But that's the incident. So hope the flight was okay.
It was fantastic, right?
So we'll try and talk about that in the right tense next time. No, don't worry. It is the way it is. So yeah, you'll probably go out. I think you'll just have gone on your flight when this goes live. So it's going to be really good timing for that. And then hopefully we'll be able to follow you through the Facebook group and perhaps on Instagram as well for those.
Yeah, we've arranged to somehow get. I haven't got service everywhere I go. Like there's no internet in the Utrecht or cell service and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But there is consistently as I move around, and I do enjoy photography as well. So I will be kind of taking some pictures and again we have 4 samples of merchandise. People have seen 2 from a recent post. And there's 2 more that we will be making an appearance in various situations.
You're going to road test them then.
Exactly. Yes.
I think the Lovefly Bear, as you called it, LFB, looks like it might have some takers. It's not that we don't want to do this because people are saying where's the merch, but we've had a few ideas, and the challenge has been sort of getting them. So we just don't want to charge lots of money for them, and quite a few of them at the moment have been a bit cheeky with their postage prices. So that's the only reason it's not available yet. But Bondi's going to road trial them, take them out, send us pictures.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
There is a Lovefly. There's a Lovefly bear. There's also the potential to have a rabbit. And
what are you talking about? Who wants a rabbit? No one wants a rabbit.
I don't know. Some people like rabbits, and then there's 2 others. I can't think what they are now off the top of my head. But
so you were onto the right thing with the bear. I think you've deviated now. I don't know what this rabbit business is.
Too much choice. People won't be able to decide. Can't compute.
It's a rabbit or the bear. I don't know. Yeah. I think that's interesting. There's been no mention of the rabbit today. I don't know where that's come from.
It's just research I've been doing.
We can get bombarded now with rabbit requests. Bondi's right. He speaks the truth.
Yes.
And with Bondi. Yeah. So as we're kind of getting near the sweet spot, the end of the podcast, there's a question I always ask people. And I'm going to ask you, because you've come into this, you've absorbed all the podcasts, but also you've got your background as well and our history. What's your advice for people who are kind of listening? You're thinking, here's the stuff I think would really help, just something, a bit of Bondi wisdom, if you like.
Well, I think as people have to choose the content that connects with them. Right, so I can't really tell people which ones to choose. They have to dip in and see which connects, and then go with what connects. The thing I think may connect with some people is the stories of the people who've already been there, right? And not even the stories of someone who's already been there who says, "Wow, I listened to the podcast; they really helped." And then I did A, B, and C, and then I can say that I don't have a fear anymore. This is fantastic. They are great. They're a great inspiration, and they're a great kind of goal to aim for at the end. But I think the ones that are more beneficial to people are the ones that say, I listened to the podcast, and then I did A and B, And then I got on a flight, and yeah, it was okay. I was a little bit nervous when they closed the door, but I looked around and I had Pete Higgins' checklist with me, so I knew what was going on, and that was it. And I even had a snack, and I went to the loo. I went to the toilet. Oh my God, wasn't that fantastic, right?
These are big things to do, though, aren't they?
It is.
Yeah.
But then they get there, and then we have the post. Oh my God, I am now terrified again. Right? I'd completely forgotten about it. I was on the beach. I was doing all these things with the kids.
Yeah.
And now I'm flying tomorrow, and I'm really having a difficult time. And then you get the post where they got home and they say, I don't know what I was even bothered about. It was just fantastic. It's the ones who have the stutter step. It's the ones who don't sail all the way through. They're the ones I think will really help people, because I think that's more of what more people are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, in life, we can't all be the Olympic athlete who wins the gold, right? Or the person who makes it look so simple. Most of us are the people just chugging along in the back,
That's
just
right.
trying to go from A to
Very
B.
true.
And I think those podcasts are the ones where, and especially where people didn't believe themselves. They didn't believe they could do it. I never, no, I'd never get in the play. What? That'd be ridiculous, right? And then they do it for whatever reason, and they look back and go, I don't recognize that person anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And I think all of that ties into things aren't going to go 100% in the right direction, but don't be part of your own problem. Like when it doesn't go in the right direction, don't jump on the bandwagon and attack yourself. Right? Say, no, okay, I know I've got this far. Now I just need a little bit more work to get a little bit further. And so I think the podcasts where it doesn't all go right the first time, that's the ones I would think would help the most people.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the bit that I particularly like about that is it's that sort of real life thing, isn't it? And it'd be great to say, because people used to say when I ran the 1-day courses, does it work? And I'd say, well, it works to whatever level you're at, you know.
Yeah.
It works if you're ready. The course runs, but really it's that sustained stuff, and it's the sort of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, like you're talking about, which is real life. And that, if people just keep moving forwards, that's going to be the thing where they'll just one day that it'll be a non-event. And I totally believe it. I've seen it so many times now. It's just there isn't a timeline. We've said 30-day program, we've said 6 months, we've said 66 days. There's all these different bits of ideas and stuff, but actually it seems to be sustained effort. It takes as long as it takes, but as long as the people don't give up on themselves. And that's why I think you're right. The ones where it's not perfect are actually the best ones, and that's the same in the Facebook group. You see those posts, don't you? Yeah.
And especially if you're flying with a Lovefly rabbit, that's even more helpful.
Right, can you let go of the rabbit already? Nobody wants one, John. It's a bear or nothing. All right. Thanks, mate. That was really good, really helpful, and thank you very. Good luck on your trip, which you've already left for.
I've already left gone now. I think you're talking to me.
Yes. I hope that flight was good. It's confusing this. But yeah, thanks for all you do, and just keep doing it, and let us know when you're away, all the stuff that you're up to, promoting the Lovefly bear and all the merchandise that you've yet to reveal. And come back and tell us all about it, how it went.
I will do.